visit healthquestradio.com.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Great news to hear the big guy and his spokeshumans tell it. Inflation is down 60% from its peak at a time when unemployment has remained below 4% for 20 months in a row.
They have such fun with numbers, Dan.
That's their spin.
Yeah.
Market didn't react well to the inflation numbers yesterday. Month over month was a little higher than expected. Year over year, a little higher than expected, running at 3.7%. But of course, that's a complicated number because you have to look at it in the context of things like, I don't know, real household income. Real average hourly earnings fell 0.2 of a point last month, second straight monthly decline. They're only up a half a point in the last year, and they're down overall during Biden's presidency. So you combine inflation that topped out at 9.1, but it's still running at 3.7, and wages that are down in real dollars since Biden took office. And, that makes a real crimp in the average American's purchasing power, doesn't it? By the way, from our friend Jim Perry, just a little rundown. The CPI increases over the last 3 years, sort of by category. So wages are a 14.9% the last three, so that would include the last year of the Trump administration. Wages are up almost 15%, but the problem is shelter, 18%. Food at home, 20%. Food away from home, 21%. Cars, 22%. Actual rents, 23%. Electricity, 26%. Used cars, so the 22% was new cars. Used cars, 29%. Transportation, 29%. Gas, utilities, 32%.
Gosh.
Actual home prices, 40%.
My
Fuel oil,
goodness.
76%. Gasoline, 76%. So, the context is important, which is why, despite all of the efforts to propagandize the decline in inflation from its peak last year, people aren't really feeling that in the prices they're paying for the goods and services they need, you see. For more on the wonders of Bidenomics, we're pleased to be joined, as always, by Jim Iuorio. He's the host of the Future's Edge podcast. He's also the proprietor of Brant's Restaurant in Palatine. Jim, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Dan and Amy.
So, I think last time we had you on the show, you were your typical purveyor of doom and gloom, not believing all the good news that's emanating from Washington, using the R word, throwing that around very liberally. Where do we find ourselves after last month's report on inflation?
Okay, well, so let's keep one thing in mind. When they say inflation is down 60%, it's one of these things that government does, and they hope the people who aren't looking too closely at it think that means prices are down, 60%. Inflation is the rate of change. You guys know this, I know. And right now at 3.7% year over year, prices are still going up unacceptably fast. Government always does this play of words thing. When they say we decrease the deficit, they hope that people think that means they increase the government debt, decrease the government debt, which they did not. The recession part of it, this is the most bifurcated economy, and you just came out with a bunch of statistics that prove that. There's still a bunch of money that's left in the system that was pushed in for the silly mitigation strategies over the last 3 years, and that money resides with the top 25% of the people. The high end of this economy is doing really, really well. And again, this is just something that happens all the time when the government tries to fix things. All they ever end up doing is pushing wealth inequality. The lower 75% is making real changes to their lifestyle, and it is starting to look more like 1973 than it does 2018. People are just you can't buy a new car. You have to make decisions to only go out once a month instead of once a week to dinner. And these things are really happening. And you didn't even mention things like insurance going through the roof, both health and residential property insurance, things like that, just through the roof.
Car insurance. I mean, my God, my neighbor got her car stolen, and now her insurance was her son's car, and he's a teenager. It's almost doubled. And there's even car, state, what I think it's State Farm. They don't even want to insure certain cars in the city of Chicago because of crime.
Isn't that lovely? And again, and remember that our mayor tried to sue Hyundai and Kia for making their cars too easy to steal. That's what when it said they are pro-crime and wanted to usher in a crime-friendly city. When you start blaming the victims and blaming the maker of what was stolen instead of the people doing the actual stealing, we're in a bad spot.
Well, and so what about the sort of overall dynamism of the economy? This is a one-off, but it just sort of maybe speaks to the environment, like the Birkenstock IPO that flopped. You don't see a lot of IPO activity. You see small businesses that are squeezed because of the increasing credit crunch. So yeah, we've got low unemployment, but it just doesn't feel like there's real dynamism in a lot of sectors.
I agree. And you mentioned low unemployment, and supposedly we're increasing all these jobs. Last week we had the unemployment figures came out. The unemployment figures, if you look under the hood, were garbage. Government employment has skyrocketed in the last 3 months. Private employment is actually down. Part-time jobs are through the roof over the last 3 months. Full-time jobs are down. Now, the Bidenomics people argue that's people taking advantage of the gig work economy. That's nonsense. Everyone wants a full-time job. Everyone wants the safety and security that comes with that. So these jobs that we're creating are not particularly good jobs. The economy is not doing well. It's doing well on the high end. Actually, I forget what the second part of your question was. What'd you say?
Well, I mean, just the dynamism. You don't see IPO activity. You saw that flop. Sort of the dynamism in sort of the entrepreneurial aspects of the economy.
And this is interesting. So I think of things like IPOs, particularly something that couldn't be less sexy than Birkenstock. They literally make shoes out of cork, which I have a pair, and I like the way they feel.
Yeah.
So hot. Such a good look. Wear with jean shorts.
First of all, adult men do not wear open-toed footwear.
Oh, that's Dan's rule, Jim.
What if I just wear them around the house because they feel good on my feet?
Wear them with socks, too. That's even sexier.
Well, just don't tell me about it because I don't want to think about it.
Okay, when this show goes live, can you cut that part out? And pretend I didn't
I will. We'll edit that in.
We'll bleep
Post.
it. Yeah. Save yourself.
No, one thing I really look at is things, money flocking to things that don't make sense. I'm hearkening back to NFTs when people were paying $200,000 for a picture of a monkey with a cigar or whatever stupid things are going on there. To me, that is an indication of too much money that remains in the system. So now
I'll have you know that picture's worth $225 right now. All right, go ahead.
Oh, I'll pick that up maybe. I'll trade in my Birkenstocks for that NFT, perhaps. But anyway, to me, it seems like the Birkenstock IPO is a big deal to me because it shows that there's not as much stupid money that's being sloshing around the economy that needs to find homes because the M2 money supply is going down, which is by design. They wanted to decrease demand, and that to me is a good barometer that they're beginning to be successful in decreasing demand.
Oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting read on it. Well, so I mean, then what is there? So do you see private equity activity? Because I mean, it seems to me that's a indication. Private equity activity on the rise. It seems to me that's an indication, buying and selling and improving businesses of market dynamism.
Yeah, but again, so I still, like I said before, there's still an extra $2 trillion in the system that's concentrated in the upper 25%. So we're still seeing some interesting things happen. Remember, the point of moving interest rates up to 5% of the interest rate curve is to keep think of it this way: in a reverse situation, when you lower rates to zero everywhere, you force money to search far and wide for investments that will yield. In my mind, like buying a restaurant 11 years ago. Would I have bought a restaurant if I could have gotten 6% on my 10-year money? Probably not. You know what I mean? I'm looking for opportunity. But again, so the opposite happens too, is that money's starting to come out, but there's still that extra amount of money that's left in that's still playing around right now. I think we start to see contractions in that in the next quarter.
So, I mean, is anything real? Is there any real activity of note that's encouraging in the American economy outside of AI?
Yeah. Okay. So here's something that's mildly encouraging: is that the rate hikes didn't affect the economy as negatively because of everybody had an opportunity to roll into duration. Meaning, just think of it on an individual level when you get a 30-year mortgage instead of that 3-year ARM, and you had an ample opportunity to do that in the 5-year period before they started raising rates. So there are a lot of people who are still sitting on their mortgages thinking, okay, this is fine. So it's not affecting as badly. Now, the other thing, I'm going to say this is good, and a lot of people would disagree with me. For 15 years, the S&P was just littered with zombie companies, meaning that their income didn't match their debt service, but they were kept alive by ever cheapening debt, and they could just borrow at zero. Now bankruptcies are up. A lot of these companies, that's Adam Smith's invisible hand. They're supposed to go out of business. Bad companies are supposed to go out of business. Now, that being said, rates should be at a natural level that they arrive at and shouldn't be forced by the government in one way or the other. But the fact that we haven't collapsed yet over the last 2 years with rising rates, to me, is indicative of a stronger economy than I thought. I still think, again, we're going to the canvas, but I think it's a little stronger than we thought, and maybe it'll be more resilient on the back end, too, if that's any sort of positivity.
Jim Iuorio, host of the Future's Edge podcast, proprietor of Brandt's Restaurant in Palatine,
I
and
have to go there.
serial wearer of Birkenstocks.
Oh, yeah.
That's a negative. Jim Iuorio, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Have you been struggling to find an easy, safe, and secure document scanning solution for Salesforce.com, Microsoft 365, SharePoint, or OnBase by Highland? Your struggle is now over, and it's time to get your documents